We now have an understanding of what SD-WAN's about, but what about SD Access? Find out next right here on IT Pro TV.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
SD-WAN, SD Access, what in the world is that about? Well, we're about to find out with Anthony Sequeira. So Anthony, as we get started here and we start to actually realize that we're starting to see more and more of these terms beginning with SD, we just talked about SD-WAN. SD Access, that sounds kind of silly. What are we really talking about here?
Yeah, well, once again, we're talking about that high level of programmability, automation, even full-blown orchestration to the access layer of the enterprise network. Remember, Ronnie, when we say access layer, we're talking about getting all of our users onto the enterprise environment. What's broken about that? Well, I don't know. It seems like a lot of times we're not all that well equipped for like mobile,
Right.
you know? So what if we have a user that's going to be like, hey, look, I need to work instead of in the production area, I need to work all next week out of marketing. Could they take all of their stuff and relocate it? And could our network dynamically evolve regarding that? Or would we have a bunch of manual processes? The answer is, in most networks, it's a manual process. We have to go in and redo VLAN assignments and do all this stuff manually. So this is an area that really begs for automation. Now, once again, Ronnie, one of the things that our students should really concentrate here on is that separation of the control plane, the data plane. So let's look at the SD Access architecture, and I don't want our students to panic. When you first look at this, you're like, oh my gosh, all that is going on? Well, yeah, but it's really not that much. Let's start down at the bottom. So we've got our routers, we've got our switches, we've got our wireless access points and potentially wireless LAN controllers. There's two ingredients here that we might not be all that accustomed to, and that's the Cisco's DNA Center. That's that incredible single pane of glass for management, Ronnie. And then we've got the ICE. No, not the cocktail party variation of ICE. It's the Identity Service Engine.
Right.
So that is the replacement technology for the old Cisco ACS that, you know, was like ubiquitous. The access control server was everywhere. Now we're trying to see the ICE be the device that's everywhere. The ICE, by the way, can be a physical appliance or it can be implemented as a virtual machine. So there's all the stuff that makes up the physical layer. Now, look, there's already a concept here we're familiar with, underlay and overlay. Just like we had with SD-WAN, we have an underlay network layer here. That would be like your routing protocol, or if you're in a layer 2 only environment and you want to do rapid spanning tree protocol, that's the technology there in the underlay. And then notice there's the overlay layer, and that is Lisp, which we're going to talk about in detail with you, because that is, at first, a tricky one to get your head around.
Right.
There's VXLAN, which there's more to that than meets the eye, and then CTS. So we'll talk about those in separate episodes, but that's the dynamic, like new, exciting technology that makes up the overlay, Ronnie. And then at the controller layer, it's just the intelligence of the DNA Center and the ICE that we added to our network down at the physical layer. And then one step up from that, they're just showing us here what they call the management layer, and that's DNA Center again. So you can see there really isn't all that much new in a design like this to make this programmable, automated, orchestrated access layer. Notice that the automation, design, policy, provision, assurance, those are just major divisions that we have inside of DNA Center that would allow you to drill into those different areas. So for example, Ronnie, if you said to me, Anthony, we've got 3 new cat switches that we want provisioned inside our access layer. I went ahead and racked them and stacked them. They're ready to go. Now I would go into the provision area inside DNA Center. I would see those devices and I would go ahead and give them the policy that provisions them on the network. So we
right.
just drill into the different areas as needed.
So as I'm looking at this diagram, in the controller layer there, you have both Cisco DNA Center and ICE. Do they have to be together?
Great question, great question. First of all, technically, the ICE would be optional, although to get every possible functionality out of SD Access, you would want ICE for sure right next to DNA Center. And yeah, those are definitely separate entities, Ronnie, and they are really, really, really doing different things. The DNA Center is in charge of all of that automation and provisioning, some security, but the ICE's job is everything involving security.
Now, what looks like the big change here, at least from what I can tell, because when I take a look at your diagram, it seems like it's almost trying to match up like OSI model style things when you kind of break it down.
Yes.
So
we love to think that way.
Yeah, but in the network layer where you have this divided up, where you actually have both the overlay and the underlayer in that network layer there, it looks like that there's different technologies than what I was expecting, like IP and MAC addresses and stuff like that. So why the big change there? What's going on here?
Well, I think the big thing is there is this real emphasis on overlay technologies. And you want to realize that just like we had in the SD-WAN, what's so cool about it, Ronnie, is the underlay, it just doesn't matter as long as it works.
Right.
You know, so that's really the big point of that separation. And I can't believe I haven't mentioned this yet. In fact, Ronnie, I haven't even mentioned this to you back at our desks. There was this big panic with software-defined networking that we were all going to be out of jobs. Well, this is proof that that's not correct because someone has to be responsible for that underlay, right?
Right.
That's traditional networking, and that still has to go on. There is, as we'll discuss in a minute, an automated underlay that you can roll out with this, but companies aren't going to move to that right away. Of course not. They're going to build the underlay with the traditional skills and technologies that they know. And then they will put the overlay on top and start doing this SD Access. So there's job security in here.
All right, so the underlay here on the details that we need to try and understand. As we start taking a look at this, ISIS? Really?
I couldn't wait for you to see this slide.
I haven't seen it actually in production in forever.
ISIS is making a huge comeback.
Okay.
It's remarkable. There's a technology, I was telling you about this, Ronnie, in the data center. And in the data center now, we tend not to run any spanning tree protocol. Instead, we run something called Fabric Path.
Right.
And Fabric Path is essentially MAC address routing. And the routing intelligence is ISIS.
Okay.
But you don't interact with ISIS at all. You don't see it.
Okay.
It's built into Fabric Path. It just runs itself, right?
Okay.
But now it's official. ISIS is making a comeback because, yes, this is the recommended IGP of the underlay. They want you to go in and configure ISIS. Could you use another IGP? Sure you could. But their recommendation is ISIS. So notice you would not be doing any spanning tree.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing. Now, you had talked about using automation, but here you have manual or automated. So if we're doing automated, why would we choose a manual perhaps?
For many organizations, it's because they wouldn't trust
Okay.
full, complete automation of their access layer from scratch, right? They're just like, no, let's get comfortable with this first. So for a lot of companies, they just make sure that their underlay is working great, and then they'll go and start automating with their overlay. But it is, please, worth noting, and these are the kinds of things that might come up on an exam. Technically, you could take all of the gear, Ronnie, for your access layer. You could click a few buttons in DNA Center and provision it all from the ground up. That means the underlay would be automated and then the overlay on top of that.
All right, so if we do this manually, Do I have to learn how to configure ISIS?
ISIS, you sure do. If
Oh,
you're going to follow
gracious.
their recommendations. Yep. And that's why you're seeing it come back in all of the blueprints. ISIS is making a resurgence. I'm teaching, what am I teaching? NSLED. So the 420 class.
The design.
Yes.
Right.
And I promise no jokes on 420. But yeah, so that's the design one, Ronnie. And it's really funny. Like one of the very early modules is I have to take students through designing ISIS. Yeah. Well, I haven't taught that in like 15 years. I'm
Right.
not kidding. Or longer. So very funny that it's making a comeback. So the overlay, that's where we just have some, I mean, you talk cutting edge.
Yeah.
This is it. These are the new cutting edge technologies, folks. At the control plane, we have that Lisp. It's actually a modified version of Lisp to work better with SD Access. There's the VXLAN. We're going to elaborate on those for you in episodes coming up. And then something else we're going to elaborate on them for, it's TrustSec. That's right. The identity service engine there is your TrustSec workhorse. And that's a great reason to bring it into the fold. Now, TrustSec, just give you a heads up on that. It's super, super simple. So don't get all freaked out that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to relearn how to secure a network. No, it's security based around tag values, and you're going to love what a straightforward, relatively simple idea that is. By the way, don't forget now on the VXLAN piece and the Lisp piece, Ronnie and I are going to do separate episodes for you on those. Just so you know, let me just not completely gloss over those now. The idea behind Lisp is an easier way to quickly track the end users and their devices in our infrastructure. We're going to actually circumvent the routing table, and we're going to very quickly locate those entities with Lisp. It's really cool. And then the VXLAN piece, that's going to give us a super hyper scalable way to do VLANs. Yeah, we can have 16 million of the things, and you'll see where we are going to take advantage of VXLAN to eliminate a ton of disadvantages about the traditional VLAN and then like spanning tree approach. So you're going to really love those technologies, and we'll elaborate on them for you. Now, when we look inside the fabric, Ronnie, of the SD Access solution, you're going to notice like there's a virtual network that we create out of these components. There's a host pool that identifies the participants. There's a scalable group. There's an Anycast gateway. All of these are necessary components so that the overall SD Access works as planned. And all of this you're going to be setting up through that single pane of glass in the Cisco DNA Center. The Anycast gateway is a cool feature in and of itself. That's going to enable you, Ronnie, to have one IP address as a default gateway across all of the different areas of your access cloud. So it's like kind of mind-boggling. It's like taking a default gateway and magically making it available everywhere.
Wow.
So it's some very cool technology. So that's the major aspects of the SD Access solution. And I know it looks like an intimidating volume of stuff, but just like anything else, I just highly recommend you break it all down. So in this episode, just understand that overall architecture that makes up SD Access, and then build upon that in our episodes to come. Like you'll know all about VXLAN. You'll know all about Lisp and those different new technologies that make it a reality.
All right, Anthony, thank you again for helping us here with SD Access. Remember that there's a key feature that we've already heard about in SD-WAN as well as SD Access, which is that separation between overlay and underlay. Those seem to actually be a theme that you're going to carry through with anything that actually deals with some type of software-defined networking as well. Now, when we start talking about that too, Anthony also helped us to review some of those different technologies as well as understand what this is about. Now, when I first thought about it, I always thought that it was more about identity management than anything else.
Sure.
But Anthony actually helped us to understand that this is about getting access to, well, those access layer devices that we think about. So all that's good review for us, and make sure that we actually go ahead and take the time maybe to watch it again if we need to. But this is a great place for us to go ahead and sign off then. For IT Pro TV, I'm your host, Ronnie Wong.
And I'm Anthony Sequeira.
Stay tuned right here for more of your CCNP Encore show.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.